Hey everyone, welcome to the Anchored in Learning Summit. I'm Kate Udalova and this is my session about microlearning experiences that rock. Today I'll share with you some tips on microlearning, and by the time you leave this session you'll have a checklist for creating effective, bite-sized learning experiences. And I hope you'll be prepared to start thinking micro. But first let me introduce myself. I've been in the learning development space for 7 years. I'm a huge microlearning fan, and now I'm the founder and chief product officer at 7Taps. It's a free cloud-based tool that makes micro-content creation and delivery unconventionally easy. And as you can see on the slide, I'm the owner of Golden Retriever, and I'm a huge fan of horseback riding. To start this session, I'd love to share with you a post I made on LinkedIn recently. I asked my network, it mostly consists of instructional design and L&D professionals, about what microlearning means to them. And I got more than 200 responses. Just to name a few: engaging, relevant, purposeful. And reading carefully all these responses, I thought that it would be great to turn them into kind of actionable microlearning tips. Just because despite the fact that microlearning has been a trend in e-learning design for a couple of years already, there are still lots of vague definitions and questions. So let's go. First of all, microlearning should be applied reasonably. Microlearning is not and cannot be the solution to all workplace learning needs. Actually, that's because nothing is the solution to all workplace learning needs. So before diving into content creation, consider the following. What's the core business problem you are aiming to solve with your learning experience? Then set a specific goal. Aim at providing employees with a solution to real-life challenges. For example, the learner can identify 3 types of aggressive customers. Or, for another learning bite, the learner knows at least one technique of dealing with this concrete type of aggressive customer. Stick to your learning outcome throughout the design process. And have in mind the typical employee you are addressing. Age, work experience, education, digital habits, etc. Because this target persona base will help you to conclude whether microlearning would fit the bill. And last but not least, microlearning makes sense as part of your e-learning strategy. Use it where it fits and design for needed outcomes. The next point is a logical way to continue our conversation. Microlearning must be actionable. And I love to define learning outcomes on the basis of how fast and how easily a learner is able to apply new knowledge to a given task. So with your micro content, you should increase the speed and enthusiasm with which learners apply the ideas. So 1 learning objective per nugget, period. Then microlearning must be snackable. In most cases, a learner turns to micro-content to learn or recall something, and they need to get back to their work immediately. Keep that in mind. The length of the learning bite depends heavily on what the use case is and on who your learner is, on what they need. But generally, the shorter the better and far more likely to be read, understood, and applied. I personally prefer to stick to 5-7 minutes per learning nugget, though sometimes content could be a little longer. I always say that microlearning doesn't replace macrolearning. Microlearning can be a precursor to longer training or can be used to deliver some prompts, follow-ups, reminders after a learning event. Also, micro-content lends itself easily to what we call job aids. Also, it can be used to deliver some basic instructions, concepts, do's, don'ts, how-tos. So micro-content can be used in both scenarios, as a part of a bigger scheme and in the form of standalone modules. Some people actually confuse two terms, microlearning and micro-content, and I'd love to set clearly the difference between them. One standalone learning byte is not microlearning yet. It is rather micro-content, because microlearning, just as conventional macro-learning, needs to include such elements as practice, feedback, reflection, metrics, and the like. When it comes to micro-content, we are really spoiled for choice these days. It might be an attractive picture or infographics, or it might be engaging video or soundbite or mind-blowing 7 tabs, you name it. But what must the micro-content be like? Well, first of all, I'd love to say that it must be relevant. Relevance should be your #1 priority. Micro-content should be tailored not only to your organizational needs, but at the same time, it must be relevant to your learners. They always need to know what's in it for them. Wording, case studies, everything should be familiar to your learners, and they should be appropriate to their current roles and backgrounds. Just like you, your learners don't like to commit their time to something they don't care about. Then, micro-content must be granular. Microlearning doesn't mean a primitive packaging of existing courses into dozens of new small ones. No magic will happen without diligent planning. So, condense your content to its very essence. No history, no theory, no background information. And here is a good formula to design a good course. Firstly, design the concrete outcome. Secondly, devise a solid structure. And thirdly, build upon that structure. Then make sure your content is accessible. Where your learners are? Most likely on their phones, right? So make sure your micro-content will work well on mobile devices. Make sure there's no complicated onboarding and that your learner can access content, in a snap. And think about delivering content the way your learners want to receive it. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and the like, they're all small, bite-sized chunks of information. So why not to leverage their popularity to achieve higher engagement and completion rates? Let's recall what we've covered today. Microlearning, first of all, must be applied reasonably. In most cases, it makes sense as part of your e-learning strategy. It must be actionable and snackable. Remember, 5-7 minutes per learning nugget is pretty enough. As for the micro-content, it should be tailored not only to your organizational needs, but it also should be relevant to your learners. It should be granular. Try to avoid all the good-to-know information and stick to delivering do's, don'ts, how-tos straightforwardly. And make sure your content is accessible for all your learners, wherever they are. Actually, taking all these principles in mind, I built 7 tabs. These two assist you in making your content short and sweet, and you don't have to customize your content for different screens. We do it for you automatically. And I bet you've never created your e-learning content faster and easier. Just tell me if I'm wrong. With 7 tabs, you can sign up online in 20 seconds. The tool is free. We have a forever free community edition, so I highly recommend you to play around with it and share your feedback with me. Here's my email. Don't hesitate to ping me if any questions come up. If you would love to talk about 7 tabs on microlearning, I'd be happy to be of assistance. Thank you for joining my session and have a great day. See you. Bye.